My younger brother broke into my apartment while I was at the emergency room, used my business account to put $11,000 down payment on a car he'd been eyeing for months. And my mother's first words when I called her weren't "I'm so sorry," or "I'll make him return it." They were, "He's been having such a hard time, sweetheart. You know how sensitive he is." The account he drained wasn't my personal checking. It was the joint operating account for the small business my late father had left me to manage, and touching it without authorization didn't just steal from me. It triggered a clause my father's attorney had buried in the operating agreement 2 years ago. One that would cost my brother everything our dad had set aside for him. I need to back up. I'm 31 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte. It's not glamorous. I spend my days tracing money through spreadsheets and bank statements, finding the exact moment someone thought they could get away with something. My father, before he died of a heart attack 18 months ago, owned a small property management company. Nothing enormous. A handful of rental units in the suburbs. Steady and dependable, just like him. He left the business jointly to me and my younger brother, but in his will, he named me the managing partner. My brother, who was 24 at the time and had never held a job longer than 6 months, received a 1/3 ownership stake and a separate personal trust of $180,000 to be released to him at age 30, or earlier if he could demonstrate 12 consecutive months of full-time employment. My father wasn't cruel. He was just honest with himself about who his son had become. My brother's name doesn't matter as much as what he did. I'll call him what my mother always called him, her baby. He was 26 when this happened. He had not held a job in over a year. He was living in my mother's house 40 minutes outside the city, driving her car, eating her food, and explaining to anyone who would listen that he was working on his music. He had a SoundCloud with 11 followers, 3 of whom were family members. My mother has always been his translator. Whatever my brother wanted, she would convert it into something that sounded reasonable, even noble, and then present it to me as a request I should feel guilty for refusing. "He needs studio time," she'd say. "You know how talented he is." Or, "He found an internship, but he'd need a car to get there. Do you think the business could advance him something?" I always said no. The business had its own expenses, its own obligations. My father had been meticulous about separating family sentiment from financial reality, and I tried to honor that. The night everything unraveled, I was not home. I had been dealing with a kidney stone since mid-afternoon, the kind of pain that makes you genuinely consider the fragility of the human body, and by 9 o'clock I was in the ER at Atrium Health, lying on a cot in a paper gown, waiting for imaging results and texting my friend to feed my cat. My phone was on low battery. I wasn't checking my email. I didn't see the alerts until almost midnight, when a nurse handed me a charger and I plugged in out of habit. 6 notifications from my business bank. The account linked to my father's property management company. The account I used to pay contractors, property taxes, utility deposits, and the mortgage on the 2 units we still carried debt on. Transaction alert. $20,200 Charlotte Auto Group. Transaction alert. $3,500 Charlotte Auto Group. Transaction alert. $35,300 Charlotte Auto Group. $11,000. Wire transferred in 3 separate installments to the same car dealership within a 90-minute window while I was lying in a hospital bed. I knew. I didn't have to guess. I knew the way you know when a storm is coming, not because you can see it yet, but because the air changes and your whole body braces. I called the bank first. Fraud line. Automated, then a real person. I reported it as unauthorized. The representative was patient and walked me through the process. Because the transfers had gone out as wires and not card transactions, recovery would take time. They flagged the account, froze outgoing transfers, and opened an investigation. I asked them to note that I believed it was an internal party with access to account credentials. I'd shared those credentials exactly once with my brother 8 months earlier when I needed him to pay a plumber while I was traveling for work. I had meant to change the password afterward. I hadn't. That oversight sat on my chest like a stone. My second call was to my mother. It was nearly 1 in the morning. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she was awake, which told me she already knew. "Sweetheart," she said, before I could speak. Her voice had that particular softness she used when she was preemptively managing damage. "How are you feeling? Your brother told me you were at the hospital." "He told you," I said. "He was worried about you." "Mom." I stopped. I took a breath. The fluorescent light above my cot was humming. $11,000 left the business account tonight. I need you to tell me if you knew about this before it happened. Silence. A long, careful silence. "He said he found a deal," she finally said. "He said the car would help him get to auditions. He said he'd pay it back when his music started moving. I thought maybe it was something the two of you had talked about." I closed my eyes. We had not talked about it. "Well, he said we had not talked about it, Mom. He stole from the business. He stole from Dad's company." Another silence. And then quietly, with the conviction of someone who has spent 26 years believing her own narrative, "He's just been struggling so much. You have so much, and he has nothing. You need to try to understand what it's like for him." I hung up, not because I was being dramatic, because there was genuinely nothing left to say. Not that night. I lay in that hospital bed for another 2 hours, and somewhere between the pain medication and the imaging results, my brain clicked into the mode it goes into at work. Calm, sequential, looking for the thread. My father hadn't been naive. He had known on some level that my brother's access to the business was a liability. He had known because he'd watched my brother his whole life and loved him anyway, clearly and without illusion. And before he died, he had sat with his attorney and done something about it. I remembered the meeting. It was 3 weeks after the funeral, in a small conference room that smelled like old carpet. My father's attorney was a quiet, deliberate man named Mr. Calloway, who had handled my father's affairs for over 15 years. He walked us through the operating agreement for the business, me, my brother, and my mother. My brother had been on his phone for most of it. My mother had been focused on the trust fund details, the $180,000, the conditions for early release. They had both signed the operating agreement at the end without asking many questions. I had read every page. There was a clause, Section 6, Paragraph D, that I had noticed and mentioned to Mr. Calloway afterward. I asked him what it meant in practice. He had told me, in his measured way, that it was something your father specifically requested. He called it a protection mechanism. It stated that any unauthorized withdrawal or transfer from the business operating account by a non-managing partner would constitute a material breach of the agreement, triggering immediate forfeiture of that partner's ownership stake, to be absorbed by the managing partner, and would additionally disqualify the breaching partner from any future claims against the business or its assets. But there was more. Section 6D cross-referenced the trust. My father had structured it so that a material breach of the operating agreement would also trigger a review clause in the trust, giving the trustee, Mr. Calloway, grounds to suspend or permanently revoke my brother's access to the $180,000. I had asked my father about it once, indirectly. This was maybe a year before he got sick. I had mentioned that I sometimes worried about what would happen to the business if something happened to him. He had looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "I've thought about that too. You're the one I trust with it, Mara. I've made sure the documents say so." He had given me a small, private smile. "Just make sure you read Section 6. He knew. He had known for years. He had built the trap before he even needed it. I texted Mr. Calloway at 1:17 in the morning. I apologized for the hour. I told him there had been a development with the business account, and I needed to speak with him as soon as possible. I set my phone down, stared at the ceiling, and felt the particular stillness that comes when chaos has already happened and you're simply waiting for the paperwork to catch up. He called me at 7:45 the next morning before I had even left the hospital. "I saw your message," he said. "Tell me everything." I did. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief silence, and then, "Mara, You understand what this triggers? Yes, I said. You're certain you didn't authorize the transfer? I was in the emergency room. I have records. Good, keep them. He paused. I'll need to file a formal notice of breach with the court. Given the amounts and the documentation, this is straightforward, but I want to be honest with you. Your brother and your mother are not going to respond well. I know. Do you want to give them an opportunity to return the funds before we file? I thought about it for a moment. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone the night before. He's just been struggling so much. I thought about all the times I had absorbed the consequences of my brother's choices so that he wouldn't have to feel them. I thought about the fact that he had done this while I was in the hospital. Not despite it. Maybe because of it. No, I said. File. I'll schedule a meeting for all parties. Friday if possible, my office. I'll be there. The next 3 days were a study in my family's reaction to consequences. My mother texted me 17 times. I know because I counted. They followed a pattern I recognized immediately because it's the same pattern I see in financial misconduct cases at work. First, denial. The dealership must have made an error, let me call them. Then minimization. It's $11,000, Mara, not the end of the world. Then bargaining. He'll sell the car. He hasn't even picked it up yet. We can reverse the wire. Then guilt. Your father would not have wanted this. He loved your brother. You know he loved him. And finally, a turn toward threat. I'll get a lawyer. You're using this as an excuse to push him out of what's rightfully his. My brother's messages were different. Shorter, more erratic. In one, he said he was going to pay back every cent. In another, he said I was jealous of him and always had been. In a third, sent at 2 in the morning, he said, Mom told me to do it. I just want you to know that. She said you had plenty and you'd get over it. This was her idea. I screenshotted everything. On Friday morning, I dressed the way I dress for depositions. Dark blazer, pressed slacks, minimal jewelry. I pulled my hair back. I've been told I look like my father when I do this, and that morning I chose to take it as a compliment rather than the observation it was intended to be. I stopped in my apartment first and opened the filing cabinet where I keep hard copies of important documents. I pulled the folder marked Business Operating Agreement and tabbed 3 pages, the page naming me managing partner, the page detailing authorized signatories, and Section 60. Then I opened my laptop and printed the wire transfer records the bank had sent me, the text message exchanges with my mother and brother, and a summary I had prepared the night before. 2 pages, single-spaced, documenting every instance over the past 18 months where I had formally denied a request to use business funds for non-business purposes. I had denied 6 such requests. Each one had been made verbally by my mother and followed up in writing by me. I had the emails. I 3-hole punched everything and put it in a black binder. On the tab, I wrote, Breach of Operating Agreement, Section 60. I felt calm in a way I hadn't felt in days. This is the thing about being a forensic accountant that people don't understand. The documents don't have feelings. They don't care if you cry in the meeting. They don't soften when someone calls themselves a victim. They just say what they say, and they say it forever. Mr. Calloway's office was on the 9th floor of a building downtown, the kind of place with heavy wood paneling and assistants who speak in measured tones. His assistant, a woman who has always looked at me with a kind of quiet sympathy, met me at the elevator. They're already in the conference room, she said in a low voice. Your mother is very upset. I know, I said. Thank you. I pushed open the door. My mother was sitting on the far side of the long conference table, wearing the blazer she wore to my father's funeral and to every high-stakes moment of her adult life, as if the blazer were a kind of armor. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hands were folded on the table, but her fingers were working against each other, restless. My brother was beside her. He was wearing the same hoodie he always wore, and he had not shaved, and he looked, for the first time in a long time, genuinely afraid. Not performatively upset. Afraid. He looked at me when I walked in, and I watched something flicker across his face that I couldn't quite name. I sat down across from them, placed my binder on the table, and did not smile. Mr. Calloway opened the meeting with the kind of formal efficiency that leaves no room for interruption. He stated the facts. Unauthorized wire transfers. Business operating account. $11,000. Non-managing partner. He asked my brother directly, "Did you initiate these transfers?" My brother looked at the table. "I was going to pay it back." "That's not what I asked," Mr. Calloway said. Silence. "Yes," my brother finally said, his voice dropping to something barely audible. "But Mom said." "Let's address that in a moment," Mr. Calloway said. He turned to my mother. "Were you aware of this action before it occurred?" My mother straightened. She had prepared a version of herself for this meeting, composed, reasonable, the sensible parent caught in an unfortunate family misunderstanding. "I may have encouraged him," she said carefully, "to speak with Mara about his financial needs. He may have misunderstood the scope of what I meant." I opened my binder. I slid a single printed page across the table. It was her text message from the night of the transfer. "Just take what you need. She has the whole business. It's half yours anyway. She can't say no to what's already yours." My mother looked at the page. She looked at it for a long time. "You knew the rules," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have denied 6 separate requests to use business funds for personal purposes. I sent written follow-ups every time. You signed the operating agreement. You were in this room 2 years ago when Mr. Calloway read every paragraph of it out loud." I paused. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision." "You would really do this," my mother said, her composure starting to slip. "Over a car. Over $11,000. You would blow up this family over that." "I'm not blowing up anything," I said. "A clause in a legal document is being executed. I didn't write it. Dad did." Mr. Calloway cleared his throat and put on his glasses. He picked up the operating agreement and read Section 6D aloud. The language was precise and unhurried. Unauthorized withdrawal. Material breach. Forfeiture of ownership stake. Suspension of trust disbursement pending review. When he finished, the room was completely silent. My brother's face had gone pale. "Wait," he said. He sounded young, genuinely young, the way he used to sound when we were children and something had gone wrong that he hadn't anticipated. "Forfeiture of, what does that mean exactly?" "It means your 1/3 ownership stake in the business reverts to me as managing partner," I said. "And it means Mr. Calloway, as trustee of your personal trust, now has grounds to review whether you receive any of the $180,000 your father set aside for you." The 180 het. He stopped. He turned to our mother. His expression changed then, in a way I had not expected. The fear curdled into something else. "You told me she was bluffing," he said. His voice was very quiet. "You told me the operating agreement was just paperwork. You told me she was too soft to actually do anything." "Baby," my mother started. "You told me to take it." His voice rose. "You said Dad left it for me anyway. You said she'd get over it. You told me this was fine." "I was trying to help you," she said, reaching for his arm. He pulled away. "Help me." He said it like the words didn't mean anything. "You cost me $180,000. "We don't know yet what the trust review will determine," Mr. Calloway interjected calmly. "But it might," my brother said. He was staring at our mother now, and I recognized the look on his face because I had been wearing it for years. The slow, dawning recognition that someone who was supposed to be protecting you was actually just protecting themselves. "You said she was the problem. You've been saying that my whole life. That she was selfish, that she didn't want me to have anything, that she was hoarding Dad's stuff, and I believed you." He stood up, shoving his chair back. "I believed you." He walked out. He didn't slam the door. That was almost worse. My mother sat there for a long moment. The blazer suddenly looked too big on her, like she had borrowed it from someone else. She looked at the document in front of her, then at me, then at the window. He would have blown through that trust in a year anyway, I said, not unkindly. You know that. That's not the point, she whispered. What is the point? She didn't answer. I didn't expect her to. Mr. Point. She didn't answer. I didn't expect her to. Mr. Muster. Calloway walked me out. In the hallway, he shook my hand. Your father would be very proud, he said, and I believed him. The weeks after that meeting were quieter than I expected. My mother did not pursue legal action, because there was no legal action to pursue. The documents were exactly what they were. My brother did not get the car. The dealership, contacted by the bank's fraud investigation, reversed 2 of the 3 wire transfers after reviewing the timeline. The third took longer, but eventually came back. The business account was made whole. My brother left my mother's house. He went to stay with a college friend in Raleigh, and from what I heard through distant family members, he had enrolled in a certificate program for HVAC repair. I don't know if that's true. I hope it is. I hope the fall hurt enough to matter, but not enough to break him. I hope in some way I can't fully articulate that this was the thing my father intended. Not punishment, but interruption. A hard stop in a trajectory that was only going one direction. My mother and I have not spoken since the meeting. She sent me an email 3 months later. It was long and circling and full of the phrases people use when they want credit for apologizing without actually apologizing. I read it twice, then filed it in a folder I labeled Family Correspondence and closed my laptop and went for a run. The business is stable. We have 4 occupied units, 2 with long-term tenants who have been there since my father's time. Last spring, I used the operational surplus to make a repair to the older property on Elm Street, new roof, updated HVAC, something my father had been putting off. When it was finished, I stood in the driveway and looked at the building for a while. It's not glamorous. It's just solid, well-maintained. Exactly what my father built it to be. I had dinner with Mr. Calloway last month, at a diner near his office where he apparently eats every Friday. He told me my father had added Section 60 18 months before he died. He had not been sick yet, or not visibly. But he had been thinking, in the way people who build things tend to think, about what would happen after him. He said to me, Mr. Brell, Calloway told me, spreading butter across his toast. My daughter knows how to read a contract. My son doesn't. I need the contract to do the work she can't do herself. I looked down at my coffee. He said that. He also said, and I'm quoting him exactly, she's spent her whole life cleaning up after people who should know better. This is the last time I can make it easier for her. I thought about that for a long time on the drive home. My father was a quiet man. He didn't make speeches. He didn't leave letters. He left a business that ran correctly, a clause on page 14 of an operating agreement, and a daughter who knew where to find it. It was, in the end, the most eloquent thing he ever said to me. And he didn't have to say a word.